Ah! What's up everyone, CloakingDonkey here, and once again we are going to examine Camelot Unchained some more. This time, let's talk about sieging. Keep sieges, siege engines, and all that awesome stuff that's gonna keep us busy for a long time. Well, at least hopefully. So the basics of the siege system in Camelot Unchained are of course inspired by historical sieges throughout the ages. That means whatever realm you end up playing on, you should expect to see trebuchets, mangonels, onagers, ballistae, siege rams, oil, and unlike in a lot of the other MMORPGs that have tried siege warfare, this time you will also be seeing ladders and siege towers. Usually ladders and siege towers don't get added to these sorts of games because it is rather difficult to balance them in-game. Meaning a castle in a video game isn't necessarily defended by hundreds of people and is not necessarily being attacked by thousands of people. You might in fact only have a couple of dozen people at most on both sides, and so having the ability to climb the walls in places that the defenders might not expect could end up being a little bit more overpowered as it would be in a real-life scenario. And, well, let's face it, in a real-life scenario, overpowered, nobody cares about overpowered, but in a game we do very much care about this sort of balance, and so having ladders in a lot of these games just wasn't feasible. However, in Camelot Unchained, there are going to be things you can do to counter this, but I'll get to that later. Furthermore, each realm will also feature very unique siege equipment both for the offense and for the defense, which will definitely be fitting the realm's theme. So if you're going to play for the Tuatha De Danann, expect to see some stuff with trees and roots, maybe even walking tree men, or growing roots under the walls which then crumble them to dust, something along those lines. If you play on the Arthurian faction, expect fiery justice and probably slightly more powerful basic siege engines, and if you play on the side of the Vikings, expect a lot of ice and watery wrath of the gods. And now let's get to the interesting bits. Siege equipment in Camelot Unchained, while being items out in the real world, so they are real items, they can be captured by enemy players, they can be destroyed by enemy players, you can build them wherever you want them and then push them around, move them toward the castle, away from the castle, whichever the situation requires. However, if you have played Dark Age of Camelot, it's not gonna be quite like that. You're not just gonna be able to just chug a strength potion, put that trebuchet in your pocket, and then mosey on over to the castle where you build it out of your pocket. If you pre-build a siege engine, you will have to transport it to the castle with a caravan or something like that. You will not be able to just carry an entire engine by yourself. However, what you could do is if you want to get a lot of siege equipment to a castle, you could just build all the vital parts, i.e. all the ropes and metal pieces that are required for any sort of siege engine, and then use all the wood locally. So fell a bunch of trees right in front of the castle and convert them into planks to use for your contraptions, whatever. That sort of stuff, as it would have happened in a real keep siege as well. The French didn't build a bunch of trebuchets and then put them on boats and drove them across the channel to England and then built them there. They would usually bring only the vital pieces that could not be built locally, such as, the riggings and the metal fittings, and then they would just use local wood, because sieges took a while, and so the attackers generally had the time after encircling the castle to build up siege engines as they pleased. And we'll be seeing a similar system to that in Camelot Unchained as well. But I think that it is a good idea to not allow siege engines to just be a trivial item, but if you make siege engines a little bit more difficult to acquire and maybe make them a little bit more time consuming to build, then you can also make them a lot more powerful, because obviously the supply is going to be much shorter. Now furthermore, the siege engines of course also follow the general combat system, so by themselves siege engine projectiles do not track targets. They are not meant to be fired at players, they are generally meant to be fired at defenses. So a trebuchet, for example, would be fired at a wall or something along those lines. And as such, they don't need to be tracking targets. This also means that siege engines can do a lot more damage because you will always have the ability to move out of the way. So if you see a siege engine firing in your direction, you will have enough time to move away so that you don't get splattered by the giant rock that comes flying. Now, as I said before, siege engines are physical objects in the world, and as such, there are obviously a few things that come with that. They can be destroyed, they can be captured by enemy players, and they can even be disassembled and salvaged by enemy players to build other siege engines or to store the materials to build more siege engines later. Now let's get to the basic system of how a siege is actually going to function. So every time you build a castle or a keep or a city in Camelot Unchained, it is going to have sort of a central energy producing structure. Be this a mage tower or some sort of crystal ball, whatever. Let's imagine it is some kind of mage tower. And this mage tower generates a bunch of energy. This energy is then used up by the castle or by the city for various things, such as powering crafting stations or such as powering automated defenses. But whatever you do with manned defenses or automated defenses, everything is going to cost energy from your city or castle's energy pool. And this is basically what's going to be fought over. So when the attackers come and start sieging you, and they start damaging your castle and you start repairing it as the defender, that will cost energy. If you use the defensive weapons to fire at the attackers, that will use up energy. The shields that I will explain in a little bit, they will use up energy. Everything will use up energy. Now, the next part, I'm just going to assume, we don't really have confirmation for this, but I assume that there will also be ways to refill this energy during a keep siege. By having the keep defenders leave and pick up energy from some sort of crystals that exist in the world or something along those lines, bring them back and refill the energy in their castle. Because this kind of creates an interesting little side game in a siege where you can, leave as the defender, pick up some more energy and bring it back. And that of course gives the attackers the possibility to intercept you, kill you outside of your castle, and all those sorts of shenanigans. The reason I'm thinking about a system like this is because that is kind of the system that was used in PlanetSide 1. Where bases had energy that would power all the force fields that kept all the tanks out, and then if you wanted to refill that energy, you had to grab it from the field and bring it back. And that indeed created a very fun meta game when it comes to sieges. So I really hope that this is the goal for Camelot Unchained as well. But again, there's no confirmation on this whole energy refilling part, just the energy part. That's what we know. The other part of the castle that uses up energy is the shields. Now, shields were kind of explained as a buff to your defenses. So for example, if the attackers set up shop in front of the keep, you can have shields that point toward the front. They are directional. And when you are being shot with siege engines at your shields, the siege engine projectiles basically slow down and deal less damage as long as these shields are up. But these shields obviously also use up energy. And so eventually your castle or city or town or keep will run out of energy. And when this happens, pretty much all of your defenses break down. The doors are probably going to be significantly weakened, or maybe they open by themselves. And the attackers basically won by outlasting you. Basically the reason for this is to have a sort of timer on the siege that eventually forces the defenders to charge out and destroy the attackers, if they can't be defeated while sieging normally. An effect like this is definitely necessary in an online game, because as we all know, defending a castle definitely a lot easier than attacking a castle. And you can defend a castle with pretty much a skeleton crew of having, just enough people to ward against the siege towers that might be coming, to ward off the, attackers, to repair the door, and then you can basically keep a siege at bay for quite a long time. And that can definitely get boring as well if that takes too damn long. So it's very good to have a sort of end timer that the defenders have to fight against, And as I said, if they do have that option to go out and get more energy, well, then there is something they can do about it. And this is also kind of why I'm expecting this to be part of it, because the basic idea behind the sieging system is that counterplay, that everything the attackers can do, the defenders can somehow counter, and everything the defenders can do, the attackers can somehow counter. By that creating a very interesting metagame of back and forth, but with a finite time limit that both sides have to stick to and both sides have to kind of play against. Alright, and that is basically everything that's to be said right now about the keep sieging in Camelot Unchained. It's definitely a little bit more advanced than some of the previous iterations of keep sieges in various MMORPGs, and I'm looking forward to it immensely, as it is probably going to be a big part of what we do on a daily basis in playing Camelot Unchained. So please leave a like and a comment, and maybe share the video with your mates, and stay tuned for the next episode. But until then, I've been the CloakingDonkey, and I'll see you in another video!